Stream is live.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Kempsey Shire Council's Public Forum. It's the 19th of August 2024. This public forum is the last one before the 14th of September local government election. This opportunity for communication with councillors from community members has been utilised 21 times since I was elected mayor in December 2021. So there were public forums for 21 of the 32 council meetings, which is a great input. 21 times, many members of the public have been able to express their views on the agenda items. My fellow councillors and I welcome and thank today's presenters for taking the time to prepare for your presentation. I remind all people attending this meeting that it is being webcast on YouTube with audio and vision. A recording of the meeting is available on the internet and is required to be available for 12 months. Private recordings, including taking photographs by members of the public gallery, are not allowed. This ruling is to maintain the integrity of the meeting proceedings. Please ensure all devices, like mobile phones, are on silent mode. On behalf of the Council, I welcome all people to the public gallery and observing live on the internet to this public forum. I acknowledge that this meeting is on Dunghutti land. We pay respects to elders past and present. We also welcome any other Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people with us today. I now call for any conflicts of interest declarations from councillors or staff. Oh, there is only one. That's from me.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, you have one too, Councillor Saul? Well, I'll go first because I adopt myself in first, Councillor Saul. I declare a non-pecuniary, non-significant interest in 10.1 because I know the parents of the proponent. Councillor Saul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I actually will declare an interest in 10.2. And I think it's a significant interest in that item. The reason being I have property in an estate nearby. So I'll leave the room, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Saul. There's no other declarations. Thank you. I would now like to tell you that attending the public forum today are Councillors Kenny Ring, Councillor Scott Butterfield, Councillor Kerry Riddington and Deputy Mayor, Councillor Alexandra Wyatt, Councillor Simon Ferguson, Councillor Dean Saul, Councillor Anthony Patterson, and online Councillor Arthur Bain. Council staff in attendance are Mr. Craig Milburn, the General Manager, Mr. Michael Jackson, Director of Operations and Planning, Mr. Wes Trotter, Director of Utilities, Miss Lisa Davies, Acting Director Corporate and Commercial, Mr. Daniel Thorogood, Group Manager Governance and Information Services. I now ask the General Manager, if he would, to outline the guidelines for this public forum, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Each speaker will be allowed 5 minutes to address Council. This time is strictly enforced by the Chairperson. Speakers at public forums must not digress from the item on the agenda of the Council meeting that they have applied to address the Council on. If a speaker digresses to irrelevant matters, the Chairperson is to direct the speaker not to do so. If the speaker fails to observe a direction from the Chairperson, the speaker will not further be heard. A councillor, including the Chair, may, through the Chairperson, ask questions of speakers following their address at the public forum. Questions put to the speaker must be direct, succinct and without argument. Speakers are under no obligation to answer a question put under that clause, and answers by the speaker to each question are limited to 1 minute. Speakers at the public forum cannot ask questions of the Council, councillors or Council staff. When addressing the Council, speakers at public forums must comply with this code and other relevant codes of Council, including its code of conduct. Speakers must refrain from engaging in disorderly conduct, publicly alleging breaches of the council's code of conduct, or making other potentially defamatory statements. If the chairperson considers that a speaker at a public forum has engaged in conduct of the type just referred to, the chairperson may request the person to refrain from the inappropriate behaviour and to withdraw and unreservedly apologise for any inappropriate comments. Where the speaker fails to comply with the chairperson's request, the chairperson may immediately require the person to stop speaking.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. As the General Manager said, I'd like to remind all speakers that you may have some councillors wanting to ask some questions about your presentation at the conclusion of it. These questions must only be on your presentation. Questions should be respectful and on the information you have presented. I will rule out of order any other questions. Speakers may decide not to answer any questions put to them. Councillors, I again respectfully remind you that any questions you may wish to ask of a presenter should be direct, succinct, and without argument. Direct questions must be on point or points the speaker has made. Succinct means short, no more than 15 seconds. Without argument means you are not attempting to change the speaker's viewpoint or opinion on an issue. With that, we'll move to our first speaker. I'll ask Jane Ford to come forward, please. She has handouts, which we have been given. She is speaking against agenda item 10.1, planning proposal, 322 Stewarts Point Road, Yarrahappini. And I wish you well, Ms. Ford, and you have to press a button on the microphone bottom there to make the red light come on. Or you can speak. Can you? You've got it.
Hello.
Thank you very much.
I reside on Stewarts Point Road. It's good to see that concerns raised during consultation have resulted in alterations to this proposal. Development is going to happen, but good development is achieved through a collaborative process. I know there's pressure to adhere to benchmark timelines, but it would be remiss of councillors to rush rezoning approval when there are still unanswered questions. I believe strongly that you have a duty of care to the wider community to get this proposal right and ensure all legislation and statutes have been applied. First up, I'm requesting 2 alterations to draft Chapter D6 Yarrahappini Land Release Area being put to you tomorrow. I believe these inclusions are needed before the draft is placed on public exhibition. The chapter's objective is ensuring protection of riparian areas in key. Access to the residual farmland, lot 17 on your map, has been totally overlooked with regard to these required objectives. Access is possibly via a road at an existing crossing, or is there currently no creek crossing as stated in Appendix E to the proposal? Well, whichever it is, it must be in line with the statutory guidelines on waterway crossings and habitat protection as set out by the Department of Fisheries, Section 4. This legislation is currently missing from this draft. My suggested addition simply sets a requirement that the legal minimum recommended crossing type be imposed. Secondly, Section 4.2 of the draft, the Vegetation Management Plan, VMP. As a preferred measure to meet the outlined objectives, the Biodiversity Division, in their agency submission, recommended a VMP be a requirement to accompany the planning proposal, acknowledging that securing this commitment puts pressure on exhibition timelines. Protecting the environment shouldn't involve shortcuts, so it was really disappointing to see a watered-down version of this requirement in the draft. Amend Section 4.2. Insert the biodiversity preferred protection measures. There are still concerns with the proposal itself. The on-site treatment assessment Appendix F has used incorrect flood mapping data, making analysis of effluent contamination risk into the riparian area impossible to determine. Riparian buffer zones have been widened from 20 to 50 metres, and this needs to be reflected in the report. Site layout maps are now indicative only, and undersized lots, as shown on the handout, must be revised. It's not just lot sizing and layout, though, that will change. The size of the entire site is diminished by the newly imposed 50-metre riparian buffer zone. Lots 7 through 11 and 16 appear uncertain, and one of the internal roads can no longer be used. New maps are absolutely needed prior to rezoning approval to assess all of this. The handout also shows an area to infill. Infill is mentioned nowhere in the proposal, except in flood assessment E to say there won't be any. Infill alters water flow patterns, which draft chapter D6 states are not to be disturbed. If site access is moved, will the native trees along the existing driveway be maintained? Draft D6 states all significant trees must be protected. These trees add enormously to the scenic quality of what is, after all, a designated tourist drive. Again, you can't rubber stamp this proposal just to meet the timeframes. If you do, then we're all going to have to go through this whole process at the DA again. What a waste of time for everyone. Look, it's not about being against development per se. It's simply being in favour of good development. And we're not there yet. So, amend Chapter D6. Incorporate the legislation required for waterway crossings. Amend the VMP so it accompanies the planning proposal. And postpone a decision on rezoning until waste treatment can be correctly assessed, new site maps provided, no infill confirmed, site access approved, and scenic trees preserved. It's your call now, councillors. Please accept these recommendations and vote accordingly tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. This is not a performance thing, but you've done very well. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to have some questions now. If I could start, you alluded to the idea that the infill shouldn't be there at all, and therefore that would wipe out those planned lots as being part of the development. Is that what you're saying?
Lot 16 is on the site. Lots 15 and 16 are on the sites for infill. Lot 16 has got to be, the dwelling envelope has got to be above the probable maximum flood height. So that's 1 acre of infill to a depth of 4 metres required in that area. And I think that's totally inappropriate. The land slopes, it slopes down into the riparian zones. And in fact, now that the buffer zones are 50 metres imposed by the Department of Fisheries, that site is not possible to achieve anyway.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Wyatt, please.
Thanks. I quickly wrote down your last 3 points. You said you wanted us, you wanted us to look at D6, amending D6, the water crossing, the vegetation management plan, waste treatment, no infill, scenic trees, and what was the other one?
New site maps and site access. You can have a copy of my speech if you like. I can email
yes,
it.
please. Yep. And my second question too is you mentioned the 50 metres. So that's actually something from Fisheries, is it?
That's in the agency submission. Department of Fisheries. You have that on your agenda.
So it's increased from 20 to 30, and it's not, and then to 50 rather.
It's
and
the legal requirement from the Department of Fisheries, and I applaud it.
And it's not mapped to you.
And it's not mapped on the map you currently have. So what that map, okay, lot sizes, 4 lots are undersized, but that map doesn't give the correct size of the proposal as it now stands. The buffer zones have gone from 20 metres to 50 metres. The second road will actually now be within the buffer zone. So it's gone, it's blocked, it can't be used. All the sites from 7 through to 11 and 16 are now within the buffer zone, so they will all have to go. You can't approve these maps and this proposal until we actually know the size of the site.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question, if I could, on what you just said. With the buffer zone impinging on all those lower lots, as you say, the buffer zone, am I right in saying that you cannot build anything on the buffer zone area?
No. No, it is nothing is allowed in the buffer zone. That's why it is an area. It goes from the top of Mount Yarrahappini, the creeks and all the tributaries from the top of Mount Yarrahappini down to the wetlands in Yarrahappini. The Department of Fisheries have noted that the landholders are on land that is a key fish habitat, and key fish habitat in the Department of Fisheries guidelines requires on class 2 or type 2 tributaries a 50-metre buffer zone.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? I'll ask a question about trees.
Okay.
Some of the trees where the proposed access will come through, are any of those trees koala food trees in any way? Do you know?
One of them is hang on a minute. We've got a black butt, a bunya pine, a Moreton Bay fig, and a hoop pine. But they're all mapped. They're all mapped, and they're all mapped as significant trees, is my understanding.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so the important thing is, I presume I can ask you this question, do koalas read maps?
Well, they should.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Patterson, I almost said Bain, but you got the wrong name there. Councillor Patterson, please.
Please, not Bain. Thank you, Mrs. Ford, for your presentation. Basically, on a development like this where people look like, I'm just looking at a picture now on one of the attachments of the amended plan showing where the possible house lots will be built. Noting that there's no houses built down below, like encroaching around the creek. Do you think that any of those people that would purchase that land and build those houses, do you think any of those people would plant bushes and trees and stuff on their property to enhance them?
Just put your microphone back on.
Well, that's it.
We can't hear you. Sorry.
No, you just comment. I'm asking a question in relation because part of your thing was that you said they're going to remove a couple of trees for the entry. Do you think that the people will possibly build, when they build there, they will add more trees? Or
they're mature native trees that have been there for goodness knows how long. They are on. That's a picture of them. They are on Stewart's Point Road, which is a designated tourist drive. They add to the beauty of our road. So to cut all of those trees down, it's a shocking prospect, and it's not necessary. They've got to move the road now. They've understood that the site of the road that they had proposed is dangerous, and the new proposal says the road will be moved, and if the road is moved, I'm asking for these trees to be saved.
Thank you. No further questions. I thank you very much for your. Councillor Ring, I didn't see your red light. Councillor Ring, please.
That's all right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted, you said something about the flood mapping levels. Can you explain that to me again?
Right. There's something called the PMF, the probable maximum flood height. The Department of Planning, originally this proposal was for 25 houses, and that was horrifying enough. The Department of Planning noted that all of the housing on the eastern side of the creek was going to be below what was called the probable maximum, or was going to be below the flood heights that imposed the flood levels that were necessary. The Department of Planning then said any dwelling site has to be above the probable maximum flood height, which is why they want to infill number 16, but now number 16 can't go ahead because it's within the 50-metre buffer zone. I hope I've answered that. So there's a blue line that says probable maximum flood, and no development can be, no house can be built within that level.
I just wasn't sure if you had said that they'd been using incorrect mapping before.
They had used incorrect mapping. There is a assessment, the on-site treatment assessment has used the original flood mapping heights that they put in their first proposal, and the Department of Planning at the gateway determination asks for a different set of, I can't remember what they are, different set of flood heights, and they haven't been used in this report. They've been used in other reports, but this one hasn't been withdrawn. And also in that report, they had a map for a farm at Mullumbimby rather than at Yarrahappini. So it begs the question on how useful that report actually was.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mrs. Ford. Just quickly, on the 50-metre buffer zones,
Yes.
do you know if they can fall into that inner protection zone that's marked in that lighter yellow?
No, they can't.
They have to be
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And there are no further questions. I thank you very much for your presentation and
Yeah.
answering the questions.
And thank you all. That's very kind of you.
Our next presenter today is Andrew Lister. He is speaking for 10.2, planning proposal, Kemp Street, West Kempsey. Welcome, Mr. Lister.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, general manager and staff. So, look, essentially, I don't have very much to speak of.
Just before Mr. Luke proceeds, Councillor Saul's giving a pecuniary declaration. This year will need to leave the room.
I thank you for that advice, Mr. Thorogood and Mr. General Manager. Sorry, Mr. Lister, we have our rules and we've got to follow them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, a very short presentation. I'm essentially more than comfortable with the recommendations been made in the council staff's report. Reflects what we'd prepared for the planning proposal. Very brief summary is that the land is the last sort of infill for the natural development of residential land in North Street. It's essentially an extension of the Northside estate, which was developed a few years back. No real constraints on the land other than flooding, which we have proposed to retain as a C2 environmental conservation zone anyway, so there won't be any flood liable land included in any future development that may occur on that land. We've shown a sample subdivision layout which could potentially work, which serves as a natural extension of the Watt Street in Northside Estate, which terminates on the western boundary of our land. We aim to continue that to North Street to allow for some continuity and circulation through there for emergency service vehicles and garbage trucks and what have you, and also natural traffic flow in that area. Also helps with water reticulation and other infrastructure as well for that circulation to occur. So essentially, just here to answer any questions that the councillors may have. Open to yourselves.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lister. If Mr. Councillor Patterson has a question, and I have probably half a dozen. Thank you. Councillor Patterson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lister. Looking at the overall development, have you been approached by a single builder, for instance, to sell house and land packages on this development?
Put the microphone back on, please, Andrew.
Sorry, Councillor Patterson and Mr. Mayor. No, we haven't been at this stage. At this point in time, it is still the ownership of the Griffin family.
Yep.
And they haven't made any particular approaches or any marketing type of arrangements at this point of time. Just noting the amount of families that are going to occupy these houses possibly once this subdivision is accomplished and the house is built. Do you think that there's going to be more room in other areas for development like this in that particular area? Or is looking at your plan of your subdivision, you haven't taken in the lower parts, I suppose? Is that due to flood? Yes, that's correct, Councillor Patterson. Yeah, it's flood prone on the southern portion of the land. There was recent flood remodelling done by council as well, which just to confirm that. And so the subdivision layout has been designed to reflect where that flood affectation occurs. And essentially the proposed zone line, the proposed LEP mapping we've introduced there
has followed that zone, that flood 1% flood line as well. So no, there's no more available land there. Essentially, we've sort of occupied the land that was in the North Coast Regional Plan for urban investigation and expansion, subject to the constraints of floodings.
And just asking a question again about the you stated that it was sort of the third part of that land sale of possible from those owners. Is this what have you got any comment on what the previous connection to this the DA is to the previous? Like I'm just looking at the roads are all connected. You know, it looks like the whole thing was planned a long time ago. So is this something that the owners have planned for many years? That's what I'm asking.
No, Councillor Patterson, it wasn't specifically planned that way. Separate landowners. There hasn't been any real direct financial arrangement between themselves. We've designed the subdivision in that way, in sort of best practice guidelines, I suppose, utilising the existing road network that's there and the service connections that terminate at that end of Watt Street for most efficient use of council infrastructure, essentially.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Lister. Looking forward to all those families being part of the Macleay.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. We haven't voted in favour of it yet, but maybe tomorrow we'll get more information. Thank you. Mr. Lister, can I ask some questions, or you're right to go?
Of course you can.
Thank you. No, I didn't see your light on. I'm sorry. My light's always on. Thank you, Councillor White. A couple of questions. The traffic exit from this subdivision is onto North Street, and the majority, could I be wrong, majority of people on there would be heading to Kempsey along Kemp Street. Has that possible understanding of the traffic flow?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's our anticipation as well. There may well be some traffic heading west as well, but I would anticipate most of traffic would come down Kemp Street. That's most likely. There'll be traffic entering back towards Macleay Valley Way, I suppose, as well, going across that railway crossing, but expect that to be sort of minimal. We haven't undertaken a traffic analysis at this point. It may well come up as part of the development application planning later down the track, but in pre-lodgement discussions with the strategic planning staff, it wasn't raised as being necessary for this stage.
Okay, thank you very much for that, because on page 22 of the report it says potential future development will be largely immaterial in traffic impacts, and there's not a great number, but is it possible, because this is just a concept plan of where the roads will go, is it possible that a road would come onto Kemp Street and not North Street?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I suppose there wouldn't be, there's no planned restriction to Kemp Street as part of the negotiations we've had with council staff at this point in time. It would be up to future developer of the land whether the owners decide to develop as per the zoning if it does go through, or whether it's on sold as to what the future developer may want to do with that land. We didn't see any obvious reason why Kemp Street would be a problem if it was to take some of that traffic as well, but felt that North Street was the most logical in the scenario that we saw for this land.
And Mr. Lister, the list of the blocks, I think there's 5 blocks, no, 7 blocks that are under the 500 square metre minimum size for blocks. Could that be reconfigured so that every block is at least 500 square metres?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Mayor. That was conceptual only. We were trying to provide a bit of a variety of housing choice potentially, just to sort of see whether speculation, I suppose, as to whether that would be something which would be useful to put on the market, or whether to have it a bit more contiguous and have at least 500 square metres.
Right. Well, my final question, Mr. Lister, and thank you for that. On page 12, it says no known sites uses which may contaminate the site are known, and the risk for natural hazards such as bushfire and flooding can be effectively managed. So there's no possible contamination from that. But have you researched the fact that it being a cattle farm for many years, was there ever any cattle dips anywhere on the site?
So, Mr Mayor, to the advice we received from landowners that there hasn't been. It was used for cattle grazing. It was extensive grazing only, and there hadn't been any dips used apparently.
Yeah, thank you. Now that would ring alarm bells if there were, for sure. Thank you. Are there any further questions? Just Councillor White, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. But I think on closer look, my question is for council, but I'll just double check. Did you say thank you for coming along. Did you say that the property next door that was subdivided in the early 2000s is not the same landowner as this one?
Yes, Councillor White, Mr Mayor, that's correct. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that.
McAvoy, I think, was the subject.
Okay. That's okay. So my question is not for you, it's for council. It was in regard of the management of the EU E2 zone and the RE1 zone, which is for council, not for the gentleman here today.
Thank you. Are there any further council questions, please? There doesn't seem to be any lights on, so I thank you very much for your presentation, Mr Lister.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Bringing back. While waiting for Councillor Saul, with excitement, Lindsay Kay will be speaking next when Mr Saul returns. He's speaking against 10.4, Corporate Performance Report, Quarter 4, 2023-24. And when Councillor Saul returns, we will start your time. Thank you, Councillor Saul. Our next speaker is Mr Lindsay Kay, and he's speaking on 10.4 Corporate Performance Report, and he's speaking against it. Thank you, Mr Kay.
Good afternoon, Mayor, councillors, members of the electorate. May I preemptively beg for some latitude in the relevance provisions in my preliminary remarks on item 10.4. This is in order to personally applaud the outgoing Mayor, Leo Horville. It's a sad loss to the Shire that he's not standing again. I appreciated his efforts in attempting to deliver a high standard of community engagement and wish him health.
You have a point of order. What is the point of order, please?
Speaking on 10.4 reference.
He is prefacing what he's about to say. So there's no point of order. Thank you, Mr Kay.
I appreciated his efforts in attempting to deliver a high standard of community engagement and wish him health and happiness in all his future endeavours, not only Mayor Horville, however. I also wish to congratulate all of the councillors for their service. This has been one of the more turbulent council terms and the community has been given the benefit of your contributions. Thank you. Bonjour, guten tag, savos Christos, Yahweh, konnichiwa, kai ora. This is about the Corporate Performance Report 10.4, or CPR, which is what it and the Shire now need. It is a plan to fail. Even a surface reading will reveal that we are borrowing well in advance of our capacity to pay. Borrowings stand at around 100 million. The cost of these borrowings are now up to 8 million per annum. Every KPI related to financial sustainability is in the red and or failed. That $8 million per annum is the reason Council asked for an SRV on every possible occasion over the last 20 odd years. Every one of those special variations is still in force. Every one of them. The average ratepayer is now paying $800 per annum or $200 per instalment, or to strategically minimise the effect, $2.10 per day, just servicing the council credit card debt. I previously referred to the expenditure as being like a toddler with a credit card. It has gotten to a point where we will have to go to the federal and state government and beg for a $1 million bailout. 2 meetings ago, in a move that should have been much more discussed and agonised upon, this council saddled the ratepayers with an additional effective $21 million debt going forward. There still aren't words. I would like to take this final opportunity to clear up a few misconceptions about my representations. I am not just one voice. I speak on behalf of an enormous number of people who petitioned against the SRV. It's not just my thoughts and opinions. I am just delivering the message, a message supported by the thoughts and analysis of people with relevant qualifications and experience in finance. There is no conspiracy theory about a secret plan to waste ratepayer money. Borrow $1 million and the details look after themselves. It's been previously suggested that paying consultants be sharply curtailed. I note, depending on the page number, that we spent $3 million last quarter, which was on page 3, or perhaps it's a mere 1.5 million, as is stated on page 21. Can't even add up. Which leads me to the KPIs. The ones required by the Office of Local Government are not particularly helpful. However, even though the ones selected by council administrations are laughably broad, they are only judged on time frame, not cost and performance. Where this is inescapable, the results are not heartening. For instance, under 3, employee wellbeing, there is a clear implication that staff are bunking off, and the solution is more heavy-handed tailorist enforcement. This does not jibe well with previous GM pronouncements about good job culture. Speaking of which, perhaps both consultancy costs and point 4, governance, could be well served by the employment of a chief finance officer. CPR indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kay. Could you tell me again those page numbers, please, that you said there's a difference in the numbers?
Page 3, it says there were $3 million spent last quarter, and on page 21, it says 1.5 million.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other questions for Mr. Kay, please? Councillor Ring, please.
I saw that you'd referenced a $21 million liability. Can you explain what that was?
Okay, you borrowed $10 million over 20 years at an interest rate. That means $21 million will have to be found to repay it. No, I'm not going to sing along.
Yes, the fine for that, Councillor Patterson, but I don't know what it is yet. We'll take a vote. Thank you. There's no further questions. I thank you for your presentation, and we look forward to your swift return soon.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. General Manager would like to make a couple of comments on your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Keys in the presentation indicated or made the comment that all the indicators in the financial sustainability program are in the red. In fact, only 2 are behind schedule in that. The rest are either completed or on track and being in progress. So just to make sure the public record is very clear on that.
There's the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Oh, we can't have any further questions. We'll move on to the next speaker, which is Julie Coburn. She's speaking against 10.8, the Slim Dusty Centre Annual Report 2024. And your 5 minutes starts now if you get the microphone working. Good. Well done. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, councillors and members of the public. Firstly, staff should be congratulated on the production of this report, which is of a high standard and contemporary in its presentation. The centre definitely provides a multifaceted cultural institution dedicated to preserving the legacy of Slim Dusty, whilst also offering an art gallery, cafe venue, hire and retail space. I would just like to outline some of the historic notes taken from Council's website that outlines what the community now has as one of its ongoing financial assets. At the ordinary meeting held on the 17th of August 2021, Council authorised the General Manager to enter into an agreement with the Slim Dusty Foundation. Now, this agreement transferred the Slim Dusty Centre buildings and its contents, excluding the Slim Dusty Museum exhibits and memorabilia, to Council for nil cost, empowering council to operate and manage the centre, including the museum. Now, during the previous 12 months, council had undertaken a due diligence financial review and developed a business plan, including options for future events and uses whilst managing the facility. Details of this plan were publicly available in the business papers. I would ask if this was fully disclosed to the community via a thorough process of engagement, outlining the reality of what costs this would create for ratepayers and future generations. Liz Campbell, who was mayor at the time, praised the decision. She also stated, it's important to note that the review and business plan clearly state that we shouldn't have an expectation that the Slim Dusty Centre will be a profit-making venture. This centre delivers a fully constructed and established community cultural and event facility acquired at nil cost that will meet a need that was previously identified through the community infrastructure strategy. Senior leadership team also said that council is uniquely well equipped to take stewardship of this modern excellent asset that will deliver economic and community benefits well into the future. They also said the opportunities that the ownership of the Slim Dusty Centre presents will see Kempsey Shire flourish. Acquiring the Slim Dusty Centre fills a key gap in Kempsey's creative and tourism infrastructure by instantly and economically gaining a large cultural and events facility. My point here is that even though it's been clearly outlined, sorry, I lost my with that noise then. Even though it's been clearly outlined after due diligence over 12 months as a financial liability to council, they proceeded with taking it over anyway. Now, this is during the period outlined by the General Manager and the senior leadership team when a thorough investigations into council's deteriorating financial position were apparently their top priority, with every avenue for financial savings being considered. Now, council may argue that it was acquired at nil cost, but this just isn't true. Who's responsible for the depreciation and maintenance on this facility? Did this acquisition make the Shire flourish? No, it hasn't. So let's have a look at it. $450,000 loss in 12 months, a whopping $405,000 in staff costs. Retail costs were stated at $81,000, but the purchase of the goods was $75,000. That's only $6,000 in retail sales. Museum entry was $151,000. Now that reflects the 22 museum tours over 12 months, plus some tourist visitation. That also needs to be offset by the ongoing licence agreement to the Slim Dusty Foundation, which is $50,000 a year, which will be for every year. There's also the venue hire, $114,000, but on further consideration, you can see that the main use of the building is for council meetings and not profit organisations. The gallery entry fee is free, but there was a cost of $26,000 for putting those exhibitions on. A huge amount of $264,000 for maintenance, utilities, internal overheads and other expenses, which I have no idea what they are. They're not stated. And it's been justified by comparing it to other regional establishments who apparently also suffer similar losses. So as a community, we can expect this loss to continue year after year with no expectation for it to improve. I'm going to have to skip through some of this because I'm going to run out of time. Also, I'd like it to be considered that it specialises in Slim Dusty memorabilia. That's a small portion of people who will have an interest in that. It doesn't represent really, it doesn't showcase the entire region. I absolutely support the arts and the large number of creative people who live amongst us, and a regional gallery should represent a wonderful addition to our Shire. But I question the council's decision to take on this facility at a time when we're all struggling to make ends meet, and council have again turned to us for their financial shortfall.
Thank you very much. And I allowed you an extra 10 seconds and you feel that because you were interrupted by the bingo.
Thank you, Leo.
Thank you. We'll have some questions now. Councillor Riddington, please.
Thank you, Ms. Coburn. Appreciate it. In your summary, what would you suggest that council should do?
Well, that is a really good question. My view on it was that it should have been more carefully considered before council decided to take it on. It's great to say that it is quite a contemporary asset, and it was given at nil cost, but it was handed over by the Slim Dusty Foundation because they couldn't make a profit out of it either. So yes, what do we do with it? What can we do with it? I don't know what's happening with the cafe. I know that was put out for lease. I don't know if anybody's taken that on. I don't think that will bring in any considerable extra income. I believe that any council function that is put on in that building, there should be some sort of entry fee charge. Council are going to have to start making these hard decisions, and they're going to have to charge people, not so much for the gallery, but again, we have all of these community halls that are sitting there. They're barely used. I don't understand why council hasn't looked at alternatives by doing a rotation through those different facilities for art exhibitions within the community, just to save us that money. I will run out of time with my ideas and possible visions for that building, but it should never been taken on, particularly it was publicly told to us by the mayor at the time that it will never make money, ever.
Thank you. Further questions, councillors? Ms. Coburn, very quickly, as a councillor, possibly in the future, we have to provide services. Do you see the airport, the pool, the libraries, the Slim Dusty Centre as a service more than a profit-making machine?
It's hard to put the Slim Dusty Centre, I think, into the same basket as, say, a community swimming centre, where we're teaching people, children particularly, how to swim to save their lives in an area where we have lots of rivers and streams and oceans. What were the other things in that grouping?
Oh, the airport, the library,
airport
roads, yes, they're all services, and
well,
council has to provide.
That's a huge question, Mr. Mayor, and we really don't have enough time for me to answer that. I'd love to prepare some answers for a question of that size. I believe the airport is coming up on a council agenda to be looked at for further consideration as to its ongoing viability. Again, it's something that's losing over $500,000 a year. A lot of facilities are losing money. We've got a high performance centre at Southwest Rocks that's never been used. I mean,
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Councillor Ring, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess one of my questions is, what other venues do we have in comparable size where people can gather and things like that if this facility was yet to not be under our?
So I'm sure there are, I would have to actually, there's a list on council's website that outlines available facilities for public functions, and I'd just note that to council that it still has Liz Campbell as the mayor. It's very out of date. But it does have a list of all of the local facilities that could be utilised for large conferences, for example, if that's what you're alluding to, and external functions such as balls, like the Glamour Glitz ball, fundraising activities. I guess when you look at those things, it's a way of supporting local businesses in bringing more income in for them, rather than ratepayers looking at losses for facilities that I believe will be used by the council for meetings. The Australia Day Awards ceremony was held there. No entry fee. It was a fantastic day, I have to say. But again, there's no income source that I can see. So there are comparable places where these different bookings can be made and can be held.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? There are none. Thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Coburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And for return engagement, Mr. Lindsay Kay is going to be speaking against 10.8 Slim Dusty Centre Annual Report 2024. Thank you, Mr. Kay.
Afternoon again, Mayor, councillors and members of the electorate. I timed this out at 5 minutes, but once I got rid of all the profanity, it's going to be considerably shorter, especially when I cut the bits that Julie's already spoken on. I really do not want to tear down anything cultural in this valley, But this 27-page glossy report was an attempt to not only polish the proverbial, but attempts to sprinkle powdered sugar on it too. This is not to denigrate the hard work of the many dedicated staff involved in trying to right the capsized supertanker. I feel deeply sorry for all the people, not just locals, who donated money to set up this now mouldering mausoleum to a man who, like it or not, will soon pass beyond the cultural consciousness. Was this report a misplaced attempt at comedy? It opens with a statement about cost effectiveness. Seriously. To the main issues. The information centre is a rack of brochures. The total time to see all the exhibits, which we pay $50,000 per annum to look after, is around 15 minutes, and I, being a musician, dawdled. As a hub, it is entirely in the wrong spot. It was never set up as a venue for anything. There were too few PowerPoints, poor acoustics, no seating. Trying to make this work even on the most basic level is misguided to the point of lunacy. The number of people in the staged photos says it all. The number of events, sad. The number of participants, sadder. The number of bus tours, pathetic. And yet it is shamelessly called a key arts and cultural attraction. Why don't we make it the Johnny O'Keefe crash site? How does this meet community needs? How does it bolster the local economy? How does it enhance the quality of life? And as to financial performance, a cool $500,000 down the pan. What we really need is a plan B, an exit strategy. How do we get out of this dreadful nightmare with as little expense and the most dignity? And that's not in this hopefully final annual report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kay. Councillors, do you have any questions on what you've just heard as a presentation? I will ask the same question I asked the previous speaker. Have you, as a thoughtful person, concluded which things that council delivers as services and which ones should be making a profit? Are you saying that this should only make a profit, not be a service?
No, it's just not fit for purpose. All of the things you're trying to make it do, it's not fit to do. There are other places already in existence that can do it better, possibly at a cheaper cost. And if we would have spent $500,000 on the arts in Kempsey, it would not be on the Slim Dusty Centre.
Thank you. No further questions? Councillor Patterson, please.
Just Mr. Key, I'll just pick up on
Kay.
I'll just pick up on what your last comment was. You have other places in Kempsey comparable that you could run events like arts, displays, etc. You just nominated. So where are they?
What about the showground? There's the Masonic Hall, there's the Oddfellows Hall, there's the RSL, there's the Southwest Rocks Country Club. You might be able to shoehorn something into the High Performance Centre. Maybe you do something outside and use the bleachers there for some purpose. There's plenty of other options. This is not a good option. The architecture of the place, as I mentioned, was set up as a mausoleum to Slim. The main central gallery is huge, but it's useless. You can't use it for anything but its intended purpose, which was to display all of his golden guitars. The event spaces, as I said, aren't acoustically suitable. They're small, they're the wrong shape. There weren't enough PowerPoints. The place is a disaster. Throwing money at it is just throwing good money after bad.
Thank you. Another question, Councillor Patterson?
No more questions. He couldn't state where we could have another place at.
Oh, he did itemise a whole list of suggestions, Councillor Patterson, but thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kay. Oh, no, Councillor Ring has a question. Thank you, Councillor Ring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I appreciate you mentioning the staff in your speech, because I'm very, very sure they've worked really, really hard over the last 12 months in the Slim Dusty Centre. Do you think that maybe talking about the project more positively in a public domain might help contribute to a more positive reputation for the centre, for the Slim Dusty Centre? If we're talking about things in a deficit language all the time, we say it's bad, we say it's bad, we say it's bad, that echoes out into our community. So if we could talk about these projects in a more positive light, despite shortcomings, do you think that might help in the community?
No.
Succinct answer. Thank you. No further questions. Thank you very much. We move on to the next.
I'll just make a comment.
You can.
Yeah.
Some corrections or advice from the General Manager, please. Thank you.
Just some general comments through Mr. Mayor. Mr. Kay's right. The building is architecturally, it's a real challenge to do a lot with. There's no question about that. It's a very unusual design. However, it was gifted. It was a decision of the popularly elected council to actually take on that. It's a decision of the future councils what they do with that. I would highlight, and based on what Councillor Ring was just talking about, since council took over, the attendances have actually gone from slightly over 6,000 a year to nearly or approaching 20,000 a year. So we've seen attendance there substantially increase in that period of time, which is a very positive thing. The Nulla Regional Gallery has just been opened, which now allows us to take on state and national touring art gallery exhibitions. There is no other facility in the Kempsey Shire that can actually get that regional gallery status. It's quite simply we don't have a facility of that nature here. So there are a range of positive things there, but there are significant challenges which I think between the staff, the councillors and the community, a range of those can be addressed. There is a reason why local government and state government basically are the only ones that operate regional galleries, performing arts facilities, cultural facilities, and that is because none of them make money. If they will make money, the private sector would run them for you, but they don't. It is a responsibility, as the Mayor has pointed out. It's a service we provide. It's a matter of how we run these services as efficiently as possible, and the staff, the team there and the staff here has certainly been working towards that. There's still a long way to go. We've only had it for a couple of years. There is, like I said, a long way to go, and there certainly are some ideas of how to improve it. They all come with their own challenges, but it will be up to the next council to determine just what it does with the facility and how we take that direction, given our financial challenges.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. The final speaker this evening is Mr. Rupert Milne Home. He's speaking for 11.1, Notice of Motion, Riverside Park Foreshore Stabilisation Project. And he has some slides for us to look at while he's presenting, councillors. Thank you, Mr. Home.
Presumably everyone knows the motion. I speak in support of the motion on many grounds. I've been a long-time resident, a registered landscape architect, professionally involved with the preparation of Riverside Park Master Plan, and designed a playground here for council. I use and am passionate about Riverside Park, the river, and what it provides for the community. I'm opposed to the proposed vertical steel zigzag sheet pile wall project, extending from the upstream end of Riverside Park to the turning area at Preens, 530 odd metres. The rationale and need for the $7 million grant project is flawed. The area is depositional, not eroding. Being on the inside of the bend of the river, it does not need stabilising. Even the images in the tender demonstrate this and are miscaptioned. This is drying, cracking, deposited silt. The only area of mud erosion, mild erosion, is downstream from the jetty, caused by the turbulence from that structure. Plants on the riverside of the path trap sediment, and council cleans the silt from the path after floods, drops sediment. A steep section under the bridge also shows a stable, non-erosive bank, and I question whether that's a failed flood thing. Consultation prior to calling tenders for the construction was inadequate. Details of the project's works, need, and impact were kept hidden from the community. Why? Being on council's e-procure professionally, I managed to obtain the details, which increased my concerns with the proposed project works. In conversation with Department of Climate Change, Energy and Environment and Waters Coast and Estuaries Officer, excuse me for the long name, he did not know of the proposal, despite the REF advising there was consultation. What is correct? Details of the proposed design. What is it? It is a vertical steel zigzag sheet pile wall, 1 to about 1.5 metres above water level, and the sheet pile goes down 6 metres below. Capped with a concrete beam with tiebacks to concrete piers 4 metres behind the wall. The face of the wall varies between 3 and up to 10 metres back from the existing water's edge, reducing the valued parkland by approximately 2,500 square metres. Any significant flows, i.e. speed, along the zigzag profile sheet pile wall will create turbulence, potentially scouring behind the structure. The project is not needed and in fact dangerous and potentially litigious for council, not to mention the ongoing maintenance costs. Public safety and council liability. If anyone falls over the wall into the river, it's a barrier. They can't get out, except at steps every 100 metres. Whereas now they can scramble up the bank at nearly any point. This is a structure installed by council. Then council becomes responsible and potentially liable for any accidents and any resulting litigation. Whereas now the bank is natural and council is not liable. Should a safety fence be required due to fall height, this is not included in the tender cost or tender. We separate the park from recreation physically and visually. Council's policies and legislation, it doesn't really comply with the, what have I got left? A minute. And it's certainly not the way to treat a riparian zone and counter to the intent of the controlled activity guidelines. Fortunately, the tender states the lowest nor any tenderer will not necessarily be accepted, and it's vital the newly elected council be fully informed on the proposal and have significant decision-making power to vote either to let or not to let the tender. How this project got to this stage is perplexing and bizarre to me. I hope the newly elected council will not accept any tenderer, as there is no erosion, the project is not necessary, it's costly, it's potentially dangerous and litigious for council, as well as being a barrier and a blight on the landscape. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Mr. Home. Do we have any questions for you from councillors?
Couple of questions.
Councillor Patterson, please. Yes, succinct.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes, for your presentation. You noted at the start you're a long-term resident. So how long-term?
42 years.
60. So have you noticed in that time the difference of the condition of that part of the river, as in the bank? Have you noticed a difference as in being covered with silt or washed away? Or do you remember when it was a swamp with trees and stuff right to the edge of the water?
I came here in 1983.
I'm just asking you. So
no, I don't remember that.
No. So Taree,
what you call a swamp is probably not what I would call a swamp. Yeah, too.
Well, it was anyway.
Okay.
Taree, Port Macquarie, Newcastle, Central Coast, they all have edges on their river for stability, for surety for council. We're talking about maintenance and cutting costs back. This being grant funded, you don't think that that's a good thing to save council money?
How this grant came to be, or who applied for it, perhaps it was someone looking at Grant Guru or something saying, oh, we can use that for this. It's not premised on need. It's depositional on the inside of that bend. If it was on the other side or an eroding bank, probably wouldn't have an issue.
Thank you.
Mr. Home, you actually mentioned in your presentation that possible for safety to put a fence along the top of it, would it have to go the whole 500 metres?
That depends on the fall height, and if anything solid underneath. I did inquire to the general manager, and he said if there was a danger, we'd put a fence on it. So I just raised it. It's not in the tender documents. It's not in this construction. If it's needed, then it would be a variation.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, councillors? There are no further questions. So thank you very much. And I thank you, Mr. Home, and all the other presenters today. And that brings to the end for Councillor Riddington, Councillor Patterson and myself, the last public forum we attended as councillors. So thank you very much for all of you for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And all the best as you leave, and don't get lost in the dark out there. Thank you very much. We will